So I'm going to do a couple of quick updates today on the Jeep project, one of which I just got a question about the airlift suspension, which is these intercoil airbags. And as you can see, this one is a little pancaked out. And what's happened with this one is the set that I received did not actually have the heat shield for the exhaust, and the exhaust runs unusually close to those springs because typically there's no rubber product inside there. So you can see that causes that bulging, which causes that side to sag, whereas this side does not have that issue. You can see it bulb out a little bit, but nothing near where this one is. Airlift sent me a replacement for it, so I'm gonna install that instead. But I do need to heat shield off the exhaust because that problem will persist. Outside of that, these have been fantastic. If you're driving long distances on the highway, inflating these up to about, this particular one is the HD brand, so it can handle a little bit more pressure. 50 pounds of pressure gives the back end a little bit more stiffer ride, but at highway speeds, it's awesome. You don't get as much body roll, and you also get the alignment of the nose of the vehicle. Most lift kits, or they call them leveling kits, lift the front up a small amount more than the rear, so you have it look more level. However, for braking, the nose is supposed to be tilted downward. That's why modern vehicles, if you look at any factory vehicle, that's how it looks. That's just all for braking and aerodynamics, obviously, but both of those things are interrelated. So obviously changing those specs is not a great idea. And this not only lifts up the rear and gives it a stiffer suspension in the rear so you don't have as much body roll, but it gives your braking function a lot nicer feel. So that's the airlift. This is the new guy going in. They're kind of a little bit of a pain to squeeze in there, but it's probably about a 30-minute project. It doesn't really require many tools, but that's pretty easy. So there's the update on the airlift. Then this refrigerator that I got from Anvil, it has been really good. I've been running this thing pretty much consistently. There is one downside. I don't know if I'll be able to see it. I've been running it for quite a few days in here. But in the base of it, yeah, right here, it's hard to see, but there's a crack in it. And I had put a bottle of whiskey inside here, because why wouldn't you? Bouncing off-road, it bounced the bottle, I think, too much, and it cracked the base of it. So I'm gonna have to be very mindful of making sure no liquids get down through and into the lower compartment of this thing. The most important part about this cooler that I can share with anyone outside of it doing its job as it is intended, this compartment here, the refrigerator compartment, is 69 degrees right now. That's pretty warm. And that's with the refrigerator on 38. So as they intend this to be a refrigeration, it is only a refrigeration space if this side is being used for a freezer. So you have to keep the back end really cold in order to use the front end as a fridge. Otherwise, what you have in the front might spoil. So be very mindful of that while using this device. So I only keep like the condiments and stuff in there, stuff that doesn't really need to be extra cold, but just needs to keep out of the elements, essentially. The other part of this is if you look at the sidewall, it's 41 degrees. And as soon as you go up into this black area, the insulation isn't there anymore. And so this upper compartment area, anything above the white line, does not receive the same type of refrigeration as the lower part. I assume it's based on insulation and where the coils stop. So the other thing is you might think that you get all this volume, but you really only get a good amount of volume underneath this white line. And that is important in that cold air sinks. So the coldest air is at the bottom of this, and this top compartment, every time you open it, will have warmer air flowing into it. And because it won't cool this area as actively, whatever's at the top might also spoil. So just be mindful of how you're using this. You don't want the food on the top to spoil. So stack accordingly, coldest items in the bottom to warmest at the top, or less need for cooling on the top. But yeah, that's about that. The other cool piece of tech, which I think that this is for anyone who does overlanding or camping or any type of outdoorsy stuff where fabrics like these might be introduced to a high frequency and human interaction level that you can't really clean. Like I can't clean these carpets outside of having them shampooed. So keeping it nice and fresh from a smell perspective can be kind of tricky. And I had the opportunity to purchase this vehicle for a friend of mine. We're getting it back to life. It's all running and everything, but the previous owner had been a smoker. So the vehicle had a really terrible smell to it. And in order to fix that, I did a little research online and I came up with one of these, which I'm fairly familiar with. But they're basically the ultimate way of getting rid of scent, whether that's smoke smell. So if you're camping and you have smoke covered jackets and shoes and things like that you're going to have in your vehicle when you're sleeping or up in your rooftop tent or whatever, this is an ozone machine. And what it does is creates ozone through plasma, through coronal mass, I guess, or so basically it's a coronal discharge. So what you would think like a Tesla coil does. So this does that, or it's microscopic or small scale lightning, essentially. It's just when you see little arcs between things, that's the coronal discharge. And what that does is it creates a disturbance of electricity in the atmosphere, in our atmosphere, with enough charge. You can get oxygen molecules to break apart, and they'll recombine in sets of 3, which is ozone. And to kind of go over that a little bit more in depth, an easy way to understand this is hydrogen peroxide, which everyone's pretty familiar with. It's the nice bubbly stuff that cleans everything, is H2O2. And H2O is water, but H2O2 is hydrogen peroxide. So there's a hydrogen per oxide. So every oxygen or every hydrogen has a paired oxygen molecule with it like this. And its stable form is H2O. Those two oxygens, when you pair them into this sequence, don't want to be together like that. So that oxygen wants to leave. It wants to break away from that bond and then shoot off. And in doing so, it will be a lone oxygen molecule. And that lone oxygen molecule will oxidize, usually organic material first. It's very good at clinging or attaching to molecules of carbon or otherwise hydrogen, so things that organic matter almost always have in them. So they're used to basically break apart. If you think about oxidizing metal, how it rusts, that's how all oxidization works for the most part. It basically degrades the things around it. So normal oxygen, the air we breathe, is mostly nitrogen, but there is oxygen in it. But that oxygen is almost always O2. That's the stable form of oxygen. This device will break apart and recombine oxygen into O3s, and those are unstable in the same way that H2O2 is. So you're basically just making a liquid hydrogen peroxide or a atmosphere oxide. So you've got this extra oxygen molecule that is now going to be floating around and trying to attach to anything in the vehicle or in your tent or whatever and degrade that smell. And the effectiveness of these tools are incredible. It is the difference between this vehicle when I got it and about 12 hours after I had run the ozone machine in it was unrecognizable. Like that was to the point where I was gut-wrenchingly ready to throw up. It was so bad. And then this made it smell just like a new clean car. It is obviously dangerous to put these around you, and you can't breathe ozone in. It's a lung and airway irritant, so be careful about those types of things. But this type of technology is also really nice because it has no real moving parts outside of a fan in the back and then like a little plasma creation. They're ceramic plates that basically send charge between both sides, and those disturb the atmosphere, and it has a timer. So you can just set how long you want it to run, and it will run and then automatically shut off. You can leave it on permanently. But I've run it in my Jeep, and it makes a huge difference, especially because I bring dogs in there all the time, and I'm in there all the time. It gets that musky tent camp smell, and especially with the tents like that hold liquid in them. Black mold is a huge issue for tenting and camping, and you want your air quality to be really good, especially in small confined spaces that you're sleeping in. So I would highly recommend anyone who is into off-road camping, into camping in general, or is just very conscientious about health and air quality, getting an ozone machine is a great tool to have. Those can pay dividends, especially for cleaning costs. And unlike a chemical, which will just mask the smell and then the chemical will dissipate and then you'll re-smell the smell, this will actually start deteriorating the actual molecules that are causing the smell in your vehicle. So it'll actually remove the scent altogether. But yeah, they're fairly cheap, worthwhile. Be very mindful of letting it air out before you enter in the vehicle. I think O3 has a half-life of about 35 minutes or so. So you'll probably be fine within a few hours of a small space. But yeah, it's really clever technology, and you'll obviously smell it when it's running. You can smell it much like chlorine from a pool. It'll smell similar to that. Or if you've ever gone outside after a lightning storm or a big heavy storm, and you can smell the oxygen that has now turned into O3 in the lower atmosphere where we are. And that's the same exact principle. It's identical to this. The lightning is creating that discharge, which is then, or creating the molecules that will then come down to our lower atmosphere, and then we can just smell it. So it's obviously not terribly harmful, but keep it away from, yourself and people and pets, plants, anything organic. It'll kill it. So be very mindful of that. But it is absolutely fantastic for cleaning and deodorizing spaces that are high frequency, much like camping vehicles. So that's about all the updates I think I have going on right now. But yeah, that's it.